online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Chicago. It's John Anthony filling in for Dan Proft. I don't know where Dan is. I'm going to tell you, during this show for 4 hours straight, Dan, I salute you, my brother. This is not, this is a very tough thing to do for 4 straight hours, and you do it every single day. Wherever you are, hopefully you're out there enjoying a very nice cigar and just ready to go on next Monday. No, Dan is not part-time, folks. I see some of the questions. He just took off today. And I was happy to join in today. I mean, I think Quinn and Justin, we got, a day and a half notice, so I think we're doing good. What do you guys think? I actually had an opportunity with Amy Jacobson when she was still here to interview our next guest. And he speaks about American institutions, military and civilian alike. And he talks about how we're running on an outdated circuitry. He also has 2 articles that he's written where he talks about before we flip the lights back on, we better rewire the system. Chuck de Caro, he's CNN's first special assignment coordinator. He's a former member of the 20th Special Forces Group Airborne and longtime consultant for the Pentagon's Office of Net Assessment. Chuck de Caro, welcome to Chicago's Morning Answer.
Yeah, good morning, John. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. It's good to talk to you again.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Now, and while the lights are off, let's rewire the government. You suggest using a shutdown, and I do believe President Trump is going to follow through this, as a moment of redesign. What do you mean by rewiring, and why now?
Well, think about it, John. If we were the founding fathers of the United States today, how would we design the government? What we've got is 250 years of history, and a lot of the departments of government, the cabinet secretaries, et cetera, were put together in reaction to rather than fundamental design. As I talk in the article, George Washington basically had 4 cabinet members. He had State, the War Department, Treasury, and the Attorney General. Congress, shortly after that, added Department of Interior because it would sound too silly to call it the Department of everything else. Okay, and then it went on until 1862, and Abe Lincoln was in the middle of a war and needed to protect his moneymaker, which was agriculture at the time. And so we had the Department of Agriculture. And then as we progressed and we, got into the industrial age, we had the Department of Commerce and Labor. But that soon split up into Department of Commerce and Department of Labor because the political tide at the time, the union movement, required that we split those in 2 parts in order to satisfy the demographic. Okay, and then after transport, the Department of Transportation was Lyndon Johnson's idea, then Department of Energy after the 73 oil crisis, and then, after 9/11, we've got Department of National Intelligence and Homeland Security. So if we had to start from the very beginning, why not create, as I talk about in the article, the Department of National Economy and take all those departments and make them into subsecretary and say, okay, your job today is to increase the wealth of the United States. You transport, you energy, you commerce, you interior, et cetera. And rather than have each one as a stovepipe, maybe working against each other or maybe operating in ignorance. So that was the point of my article.
Okay. Now, and you talk about the departments that you're talking about merging are commerce, labor, agriculture, transportation, and energy into this Department of National Economy. Now, here's my question to you. What efficiencies or do you think strategic clarity would that bring?
Well, I talk about, that I've worked as a strategist. One of the problems we've got writ large is China. And they have increased their wealth, or the wealth creating capacity, immensely in the last 20 years, and we have not. So why don't we streamline our ability to make money, to make the country wealthy, by taking these old institutions and recombining them into a cooperative set of departments that have one goal in mind, that has increased the wealth of the United States.
Yeah. Now, you also argue that Homeland Security should be folded into the Coast Guard, and that the intelligence should return to what we used to have, the Office of Strategic Services style structures. What problems? Because I'm a problem solver. I believe in solving the problems. You can tell me about the problem, but I want to. How do we solve it? What problems would those moves solve?
Well, you got to understand, how did we get to the military structure we have today? Well, after World War II, we had the National Security Act of 1947. So we took everything we learned about World War II and wanted to unify the services, and wound up with not only another service, the U.S. Air Force, but also the Central Intelligence Agency. Now, the dynamics of the time were, have been forgotten. Harry Truman did not like William Donovan, who was the head of the OSS. And as a matter of fact, the OSS was deactivated on the 30th of September in 1945, and its parts were flung out into the State Department and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, et cetera. And only about a year and a half later, he said, "Oh, look, Cold War, now what do we do?" Instead of bringing back the OSS and pointing out that he made a mistake, he created, as a result of congressional actions, the Central Intelligence Agency. But now we go to Goldwater-Nichols in the 1980s, and what do? We create the U.S. Special Operations Command. Yeah. Well, essentially, that's what OSS was doing under the leadership of William Donovan during World War II. Now, so we need to kind of look at how do we streamline stuff. Yeah. Regarding the Coast Guard, you were a state trooper at one time, correct?
I was a county deputy.
County deputy. Yeah. Okay. You know that, the training that you went through was different from the training that local city cops go through, yes, which is different from state cops and different from feds. Well, I teach at the National Intelligence University, and I can tell you that now we have 18 different intelligence agencies. That's true, 18 different intelligence agencies. They aren't all trained the same way. The same with the Department of Homeland Security. All the disparate agencies in there do not go to the same school to learn the basics of Homeland Security. I admire the Coast Guard, having worked with them both while I was in the military and afterwards. They do everything right the first time with, limited amount of resources. And not only that, but they come under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So when you get shenanigans like, well, hey, after this disaster, if the guy's got a Trump sign in his front yard, don't help him. Go on to the next one. Yeah. If you came under UCMJ and somebody found out about that, you'd be in Leavenworth in short order. So, that's how I feel about it. Now, the likelihood of this happening, I don't know, but I can tell you, every time I work with the Coast Guard, I came out smiling. They are just remarkable people.
They really are. I think I did a training with them many years ago. But you've spent years advising the Office of Net Assessment. If you don't know what that is, that's pretty much the Pentagon's internal think tank. They're the think tank for the Pentagon. Now, from that vantage point, what are some of the institutional blind spots you think most need rewiring?
Well, one of the problems is in reference to China. Okay. As Americans, you've heard the phrase we're a nation of businessmen. Okay? Well, businessmen work on the 90-day turn and the 1-year turn. When you're up against China, we're looking at generational turns. And so we have a problem with consistency over time. Every 2 years, Congress changes, maybe a little, maybe a lot. Every 4 years, the president changes, maybe a little, maybe a lot. And so, your ability to maintain a policy, a strategy across time compared to an adversary who is looking at generational lengths of time, we have that problem.
Yeah.
Now, how to solve it, I'm not sure, but it's there, and it is a problem.
Yeah. Now let's pivot over to your memo to HEXAC. Now
Yeah.
you write that the rot in the military isn't just physical unfitness, but bad education. Define what that bad education and what does that rot look like up close?
All right. You got to understand that we are no longer in the industrial age where you need to have extreme physical fitness and sharpened bayonets and rifles. That's all part of the process. But we now have something called information warfare. And in it, it requires two things, a kind of profound education, and for lack of better way to express it, it's a corkscrew thinking to outthink the enemy. Yeah. So one of the things I did for the Office of Net Assessment 10 years ago was to create a unit that would work in information warfare. And it was composed of about 50 members of the Air and Army National Guard in California who had civilian jobs in the movie industry, in Silicon Valley, and everything in between. Now, when you're doing information warfare, the problem is when you learn, if you're in the military and there's a new wrinkle out there, let's talk about the latest in artificial intelligence. By the time they see the problem and are cognizant of it, and then create a school to train people to do things, the time to act has already passed. You're behind the power curve. What's interesting with the men and women in the Guard is they're doing this every day. You know, internet marketing could easily turn into internet propaganda. It's the same thing. Okay, you're putting the best face on a problem and trying to sell it.
Yeah.
The people who are building software, you know, before it's even beta tested, may know a back door that nobody can see. So you have people who are already immersed in that environment who are doing every day. And you can't do that in the military because you have all these other jobs to do. And you have to, on the other hand, you also have to maintain them in the military. Well, a guy who becomes a cyber sleuth in the military, when he comes up for reenlistment, there are all these jobs out here in the civilian world that will pay him 3, 4, 5, 6 times more than he's making in the military. And so we tend to lose a lot of people as soon as they're trained. So one of the things I look at is the concept of virtual units that live in time and space across the internet, and then you bring them together to do certain specific jobs and then send them back out again. That's the experimental unit that I built, and I'm very proud of.
Yeah. If you're just joining the show, we're talking to Chuck de Caro. He's CNN's very first special correspondent. He served with the 20th Special Forces Group. Now, finally, here's my last question, because I don't think I've seen anybody invoke this character in a very long time. You end by invoking Lucius Quintus Cincinnatus. If you don't know who he is, he's the farmer general who fought, won, and returned home. What would a modern Cincinnatus look like in America today?
Oh, God. One of my students was Major General David Grange, who, in fact, ran the McCormick Foundation for many years before moving on to some other things. But he's just that type. He would do his duty and go back to the farm there in Illinois. So, yeah, there are modern guys who are very much like Cincinnatus. But the whole point is, I love my country. Ask me what you want me to do. Do I want to retain power as a Caesar? No, I just want to go back to the farm. That's the way that ancient Roman did it. And you know, when you think of you talk about the greatest generation, that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
You know, Dick Winters, you know, the commander of the of Easy Company, 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment, said, you know, all I want to do is go back to the farm and not do another thing ever. And that's exactly what he did.
Now, Chuck, we got about a minute and 30 left. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk to you about this. China's digital battlefield. Now, that figures heavily in your warning. Where are we most vulnerable, and who's leading that counterattack?
Okay, I'm trying to tell you what, John Warden, Colonel John Warden, U.S. Air Force retired, who's famous for his idea of instant thunder, which became the war plan for Desert Storm, and and Colonel Larry Weaver have come up with an assessment of what China could do. We rely on mutually assured destruction as a way to keep the peace. The problem is that nuclear weapons and missiles that go with them are obsolescent. And we created a website called winningpeerwars.com, winningpeerwars.com, which talks about their advancements that the Chinese could use. One of them is advanced biosystems, like COVID. Imagine if COVID were far more lethal, created in a lab, and spread across the United States prior to dropping the electric grid and dropping the internet. Because we have become dependent on information transfer on a massive scale, what would happen?
Wow.
You
That's
could
scary.
leave the United States prostrate, and what are you going to do? Use nukes after that, only to be renuked? What I'm saying, the advance of technology at this point favors China because we've been sitting on our laurels for the last 25 years.
Wow. Well, Chuck de Caro, we got to leave it there. He's co-authored the Cyber War series of textbooks used in U.S. and allied war colleges. He's taught at both the National Defense University and the National Intelligence University. Chuck de Caro, thanks so much for joining us on Chicago's Morning Answer.
Okay. Take care, John.
All right, my brother. Good to talk with you. All right, now, Justin, I think that means now we're on. Is this open mic Friday, or do I go to break? And he joined us on our Turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
This is Seth Leibson for townhall.com. The Donald Trump Gaza peace plan marks a major development towards solving the intractable. But as Winston Churchill